Well, hello everybody, and welcome again to the Weirdly Magical podcast. We are talking today about the Gemini full moon that is on December the 12th, 2019 at 5:12 a.m. Universal Time, which is London time. So it's actually late on December the 11th for those of us on the West Coast of America. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. It is at 19 degrees and 51 minutes Gemini and Sagittarius. But first, let's do a quick introduction. And we do have a question that we'll be talking about towards the end. And we do have a little bit more information about our 2020 overview call as well. But Jen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Jen Duchenne. I'm an Akashic healer, numerologist, and creator of the Illuminating Journey cards, and I guide my clients to find the truth of who they are and help them connect to their soul using tools, guidance, mentoring, and I teach and have groups, etc.
Cool. And I am Louise Eddington, and my new business name is going to be Cosmic Owl Astrology. The owl. And that's mainly because Pallas Athena, the asteroid, is conjunct my ruling planet, and she is the astrologer's asteroid, and the owl is one of her symbols. But anyway, I do soul astrology readings, I do consultations, I have a membership group, and I am the author of Modern Astrology and the soon to be published Complete Guide to Astrology that's written for everybody from a non-binary perspective, asking us to change the language we astrologers use. And I think that's about it. I'll tell you where to find me at the end. But anyway, I stream the stars. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about the full moon. But first, if you have any questions, we do have one from somebody today, as I mentioned. You can email them to weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com, and you may be featured on the podcast. And we also have a Patreon. We actually have some patrons now, so thank you so much. We'll soon start to introduce patron-only content when we get a few more patrons. It does help to support the running costs of this podcast, which we love doing. So, and the call, we're doing a free call, a free Zoom webinar on December the 5th. Yeah. We're doing it December the 5th now, yeah. At 12 p.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Mountain, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time. And I've just posted a registration link for the call on my Facebook page, Louise Eddington Astrologer. I'll be sharing it in my groups. Jen will be sharing it too. If you register for it, you'll get the call details in your email, and the call will be recorded, but if you're on live, you get to ask questions. So come join us for a 2020 overview. But before we dive into the full moon itself, we've both pulled cards as usual. And Jen, what card have you pulled?
So I got the two Soul Portal. And for those of you who can't see it, this is like a very green background, green forest, and there is a deer and or buck, I guess. I think it's a female, but anyway, it's a deer and a female form, and in between is and they're kind of bending over a river or like a little pond or something. And there's the chalice there, the figure who may be somewhat fairy-like, has the moon, a full moon actually, in her headdress.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the symbol that has the triangle and the circle, the male and female energies. So this, to me, is the two. It symbolizes the idea of converging our differences, or whatever it is that is mysterious and whole to us, that we want to bring in the earthly energies, the cosmic or the otherworldly energies, how to kind of align ourselves in this kind of forest or this Eden, this idea of being whole and being willing to take a new path. And it feels like, in this case, a little bit almost there's some uncertainty or needing to check in and make sure that things are going in the right direction. But basically, this is the idea of tapping into divine guidance to kind of be present or embodied on earth.
And I find it interesting that it's a 2 because it's Gemini, of course.
Right, the twins, and here you have 2, which you could say twins in certain, or 2 aspects of a whole. And of course, 2 is about bringing things together in new ways, using the intuitive and material.
And funnily enough, and I had not seen Jen's card, and I pulled a card, only 2 cards leapt out at me, so 2, Gemini again, and I got the Prince and Princess of Cups.
Wow.
Like, you can't make this stuff up. So talking about bringing, the 2 together. So these are the emotional objectivity is the Prince of Cups. And, oh no, that's the Princess of Cups. And mastering emotional desire is the Prince of Cups. So it's bringing together both, the yin, the yang, the opposites, the masculine, the feminine, and also your desire and your objectivity. And of course, these are cups, and like Jen has the chalice. So it's like, where you cannot make this stuff up. But, both cards to me indicate this real kind of becoming whole, this moving into a place of very emotional fulfillment. I always think of the green of Jen's card as the color of Venus, and also the color of values and money as well. So it's the color of love, and this and the cups in the tarot the number love as well. So
abundance. I mean, when you're making a connection between 2 things, when you're making a connection between yourself and the divine, or your physical expectation or whatever of life and the world you're living in, right? It's all about relations and relationships, and that's what the 2 is all about. It's about how we connect to something else to get where we want to go, or need to go, or have to go, so yeah, that's very interesting that we both, and I didn't know what you had. So
no, she didn't have a clue.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Because I was
kind of chuckling as Jen held her card up, and I looked again at mine. I was like, oh. And I do find it interesting that the cups in the tarot, both these 2 cups cards have birds on their head. One has a swan and one has an eagle. And of course, birds are related to air signs, and of course this is a full moon in Gemini, which is an air sign too, so.
Right,
and that's usually messages from spirit kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah,
there might be a bird in here, it's hard to tell. The one thing there is, I mean, this kind of, they are like wings in here, this little kind of fairy figure, so it's interesting.
So yeah,
all about air, right?
So there you go. In the usual, you cannot make this shit up thing, we both picked almost the same cards.
I know.
So Jen, so this full moon, as I said, is at 19 degrees and 51 Gemini. That's where the moon is, and the sun is always opposite on a full moon, and that's at 19 degrees and 51 minutes of Sagittarius. Pallas Athena, the owl, is at 14 degrees and 30 minutes of Sagittarius, and we're just recording this just after the new moon in Sagittarius, where Pallas Athena was conjunct the new moon, and here she is. She's moved on with the sun and is conjunct the sun on the full moon too. So Pallas Athena has been very involved in this this month's lunations altogether. Also on this full moon, Chiron or Chiron, whichever it is stationing direct the day after on December the 13th. So Chiron is stationed on the full moon. Also by the full moon, Jupiter will have moved in to Capricorn. So we'll have Jupiter, we'll have Venus, Jupiter, Ceres, Pluto, Saturn, and the South Node all in Capricorn by this full moon. And it's the last new or full moon before eclipse season. It's the last full moon of the year. And the eclipses start on December the 26th, and then the next full moon is January the 10th. So just a few facts about the full moon. Anything else I need to say before?
And is that when the nodes move?
The nodes move, I can't remember when they move. No, we've got a bit longer before they move into Gemini and Sagittarius.
Okay, next year then.
It's next year, because these eclipses are in Cancer and Capricorn. Yeah.
Right.
So,
right, exactly.
Yeah. So let's look at the numbers first then, or whatever else you've got to say about it, Jen, or whatever the masters want to say as well. So.
Let's see.
I will say it's square to Neptune. We did want to mention that. This one is square to Neptune, which incidentally stationed direct this morning as we record. And the new moon in Gemini was back on June the 3rd, just before Neptune station retrograde. So Neptune's kind of followed this whole Gemini lunar cycle pretty much. So we've got some stuff to say about that as well.
Right, very exciting. Mm-hmm. Well, I think what's really fascinating is I just want to mention that, of course, we'll be in December for this. So we're moving into a 15 universal months, because we're in a 12 universal year, and December is a 3-month, the 12. So what is fascinating to me, well, first of all, when we have a 15, we're looking at which is a 6. It's an emotional number. It's called the spiritual alchemy, the number of spiritual alchemy. And what it is about being of service with joy, creating joy by doing the things you love doing, or even the things you know you need to do, but do it from a place of deep, abiding joy. So when you're going into feeling like you're being a martyr, you either have to shift your energy, or you have to stop doing it and say no. So this is a really key message here that I feel relates very much to both our cards and this idea of Geminis. For me, what it feels like, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, is that Gemini, or this is what's coming through, the fact that Gemini is our mind and how we think. And we've been going through this process with Neptune to let go of some old beliefs and, well, of course, with the Sagittarius stuff, let go of old beliefs and old kind of practices that we have considered either religious or spiritual, or needed to be a certain way. And with all of this, it's shifted us. So now we have a more devotional way to be of service, or be of service in our lives, of service to the divine, and do it so we're contributing, because 2 is about contribution. Mm-hmm. And the year, the 12, is about joy. Like through our own experience and learning wisdom, we create joy. So here we are, we have the 3 and the 6. Those are both emotional numbers. Those are both about our feelings. And to have all this energy about Gemini, our minds opening up with this influence of Neptune, it's like our feelings are being expanded in new ways. So we're getting this opportunity to actually let go of old feelings. And some of us have already gone through quite a bit of that. So that's really very interesting. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is because, well, certainly here in part of the States, it's happening on the 12th day. And we'll talk a little bit about the 11, but I want to talk about the 12 because that's pretty fascinating. It's a 12 day in the 12 month of the 12 universal year. and the degree of the sun and moon is 19, and we have a 19 calendar year. Now we've had this kind of, I think it was the last moon or one of the ones before, we had the same thing where it might have been this past new moon, where the numbers were repeating of the year. So it's like another message, having this 12 and 19 again. And 19 is a number of new beginnings, 1 and 9. So we have the beginning and the end. And it's kind of like that relationship between Neptune and Mercury, in a sense, right? Is the beginning and at the end. And of course, Mercury is at 4 degrees. And what is Uranus at?
3.
3 degrees, right? The higher mind, right? Well, some people see Uranus as the higher version of Mercury. So it's much more out there, and then comes into something we can actually understand and work with in our human experience. So that's pretty fascinating.
I do want to mention that
right.
new moon back on June the 3rd was at 12 degrees too.
Right, so it was the last one because it was 12 degrees and it was at 19. It was on the something about 12 and 19. I don't remember. Oh, it was a 12-degree moon.
It was a 12-degree Gemini moon.
Oh, maybe it was something else. Was the 19
Gemini new moon.
universal there. So that's pretty fascinating, right? Because the 19 is telling us it's time to shine our light and be of service in this way that's very different, this alchemic way of expanding our broadening our view, how we're seeing the world, and changing the way we work with our emotions. And most people who work in the field of epigenetics, which is about our emotions in a higher level, talk about the fact that when our emotions are stuck in our bodies, that's what creates all despair and all these different things. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other reasons, but it does contribute to how we feel. So if we can release some of the thought around those ideas, which is why they stay stuck in our body, which this is what this full moon feels like. It's the culmination of the old feelings that are now being released. And we have this opportunity to go, I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay with how I comport myself. It's a funny word, comport. And other people may not like it, but you know what? That's okay, because we don't have to agree on all this stuff. This idea of just fighting about stuff just to be right, that's a very Capricornian thing from the plutocracy, right? It's very much the idea that I must be right and might is right, and what I have the most weapons, so I'm in charge. So breakdown of all of that to, it's so good, I'm okay with who I am.
So from the astrological perspective, when I look at it, of course, it's, these are Gemini and Sagittarius are mutable signs. So of course, this is bringing a change. Mutability is changing times. Gemini, as Jen has talked about, is about the mind, and it's information coming in, and it's learning and all that kind of energy. And Sagittarius, on the opposite side, is really the guru or the teacher, and the one who's taking all that information learned out into the world. And the fact that the sun is conjunct Pallas Athena. Now, Pallas Athena is really is the asteroid with this piercing vision of the owl. That's why I have the owl behind me. And it's, the owl can see in the dark. The owl can see from multiple angles. The owl can see the tiniest thing from way up high and hone in on it. And that's what the asteroid Pallas Athena has. So to my mind, this full moon is very much, if we look back to June the 3rd and the fact Neptune's been retrograde for pretty much this whole time since that new moon in Gemini to the full moon in Gemini, it feels like clouds are parting, decisions have been made about, or are to be made, about what we're finally releasing, letting go of, which is very Neptune in Pisces as well. Surrender, let go, dissolve. letting go of some old ideas about who we are, what the world's about, what belief is about, what we have faith in, what we believe in. So it really feels like a turning point, to my mind, that we've been working on since early June. So that's major. And as well, as Jen said, Mercury rules Gemini, the moon, and Mercury is in the sign of the teacher. So there's a lot about taking, and as well, the moon is a receptive sign, and the moon is in Gemini. So there's a big theme in this, I think, about taking what we've received, what we've learned over the last 6 months. And I don't mean you have to become some kind of spiritual teacher, but it's time to kind of take your Sagittarian arrows and take it out into the world now, and kind of act upon, which is very Sagittarius as well, very forward movement, taking it and integrating it into your life. So that's kind of my main feeling about that. And as well, as Jen said, Uranus is the higher mind and is in aspect, is actually in an inconjunct aspect to Mercury, which is an awkward aspect, but is called a break-free aspect, actually. And it kind of means we're breaking free of those old ideas again. So the astrology is kind of backing up the numbers in big ways. But as well, we have Jupiter. Jupiter will have moved into Capricorn for the first time in 12 years. Moves in on December the 2nd, I think. And by this full moon, we'll be at 2 degrees of Capricorn and in aspect to Uranus. I think with Uranus in Taurus and with the aspects to Uranus in Taurus from Mercury and Jupiter, I think we're going to get some really big information coming through on this full moon around the climate again, possibly, and about the economy. We're moving into eclipse season, as I already said, and then we're moving into this period where all these planets are converging in Capricorn. At this point, Venus, which rules Taurus, where Uranus is, which is associated with the earth and the climate and also money and the economy. Venus on this full moon is sandwiched neatly between Saturn and Pluto, having just crossed over Saturn. She's starting her new cycles already, and here she is at 20 degrees, which is another 2. So there's so much change here, so much moving on, new cycles, decisions to be made, letting go of old ideas before we start these new cycles, literally. And, we get a new moon eclipse on December the 26th, which is always a reset. Then we get all these other planetary cycles starting, so many new cycles, some of which last for years and years and years. It's kind of like now it's time to decide which way you're going to really kind of move forward, to my mind.
Right. Yes, it's very fascinating with all of this movement that is incredibly historical. Also, just thinking that we are coming to the solstice on the 21st or whatever, I don't look at the exact date, it might be the 20th or 22nd, which means we're in the space of continuing to lose light if we're on the northern hemisphere and coming to that point where things start to shift. So that's really important, because just thinking about the placement of what happens when you're in that space of losing light or going into the darkness, it really is this time to begin to prepare, like Lou was saying, this idea of taking your arrows. You may have 20 arrows, but now it's time.
Sorry.
Bless you. I don't know if you sneeze. You're just coughing.
Coughing.
Kind of point their arrows at what is true for you, what you value. And of course, remembering Uranus in Taurus, this is about our values. So we're going to have to put money down to play. And I mean, we're just going to have to put our world where whatever it is we value that we're willing to pay for in order to make happen, we're going to have to take care of that. I didn't mention, but I think it might be significant, is the fact that if you're in the area where this falls on the 12th, that then gives us an 18 universal day, which is really about endings, and gives us a 9. 3, 6, and 9 are all the emotional numbers. So a lot of emotion around all of this. There's a lot of perhaps fear even, which is part of emotion. Undigested emotion will create fear, right? Because we haven't dealt with things we haven't dealt with. And now we're going to hit those places, whether it's the climate. Each of us is going to have the areas that we actually are in fear around, that are going to be coming in front of us for us to look at. And it's not a matter of saying, well, this is fierce, I want to look away. It's much more of the idea that I have ignored this or hidden this part away of my life because I couldn't deal with it. I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't know what to do. I was a child, so just kept doing the same thing. Whatever the reason is, it really doesn't matter. The point is, now you're going, you know what? I'm actually going to look at this thing and make a different choice. I'm going to engage with it by saying, oh, so what's this about? What do I need to do? Okay, it may be scary, but I'm going to do it. And this is really a big thing here that we're looking at. And then, of course, if we look at it in terms of it being on the 11th, of course, we've had a lot of things about the 11 being that gateway energy, that master energy that is asking us to step into a new space, like go beyond where we've been. That sense, that Sagittarian sense of being willing to travel to new places and new beliefs and have different opinions, because we do all have fixed opinions about stuff. And now it's like, oh, I'm being confronted with a fixed opinion that is probably not true. When, I don't know, hopefully I don't repeat myself, but when I was in South Africa a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with my brother and about stuff like, and in my mind, this was stuff that I had, I believed this was true for me, and we were having the conversation. And then whatever he said made me realize, like, wow, I've been carrying around this belief around our relationship or whatever for all this time, and actually none of that's true. It's just been like a story in my head. So it was really kind of like, wow, that's really interesting. So I could just kind of let that go and go, oh, this is something new. And I think that's really the space we're in, is going, oh, I thought it was Y, but it's actually, X, whatever.
And as well, we cannot not mention Chiron or Chiron, however you say it, stationing direct right after the full moon at 1 degree of Aries, which is basically on the world axis, which is the 0 degree of all the cardinal signs, and they're Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And we've got Neptune in Pisces squaring this full moon, and he was basically really been squaring this whole lunar axis since June the 3rd, because he was squaring the new moon back then as well. And that's very much about faith and trust and grace and all that energy. And Chiron, I prefer saying Chiron, so I'm going to say Chiron. Is such an interesting creature, because really he's basically the energy of the true Christ consciousness. If you look at the myth, because all these myths kind of go into one another, all the themes, and the centaur that was Chiron was actually kind of a teacher, a healer. He was an archer. He was just kind of all the highest energy of most things. He was teacher to the gods, and he was the wounded healer, because he had the wound that would not heal, and so it takes us back to the killing of Jesus on the cross. So all these myths kind of meld into one another. But Chiron, to me, really is kind of this unconditional love, peace, all that kind of energy that is the true Christ consciousness. But he's in the sign of Aries, which is the I am. This is Aries, is the first sign, the beginning. And turning direct at that 1 degree, it's a new beginning of our identities, is basically Aries. A lot of people have said that Chiron in Aries is about healing the masculine. I'm going to suggest yes. But after writing this new book that I'm writing, I'm trying to move away from saying masculine and feminine to talking about day and night energy. And our society has valued this day energy of doing all the time. It's not valued to rest and to be receptive and take things in. And if we're being asked more and more as we move into this new paradigm to move into more this twilight or night energy, where we can see things with our imagination a little bit, reimagine things. Things look a bit different in the dark. We're being asked to kind of step out of this everything having to have this glaring, rational, bright light on it, which we've actually physically done in this world by everything's lit all the time. We always have lights on. We always have our screens going. We have streets are lit up. We've tried to really shut out the night, basically. Well, I think part of the message of this changing into this new paradigm is to get more comfortable with this this night energy and living without the light a bit more and being more focused on our feelings, all these energies of night. So I think it's really another big turning point of this full moon, that Chiron is turning direct at the very beginning of the very first sign at the same time, before we move into all these new cycles.
Yes, very powerful. I was just thinking about the legend of Chiron, where he, one thing, he was neither, he didn't belong to the, what do you call it?
The centaurs.
Centaurs. He was neither centaur nor human or
Yeah.
god-like, whatever. He didn't belong anywhere,
Mm.
which again speaks to this duality, right? The duality of being alone. And in fact, took a poison arrow for, I believe it was
Prometheus.
right?
Yeah.
Was it? Yes, yeah, right. So that poison arrow that I believe he may have crafted, I'm not sure. Okay, that's whether he crafted or not didn't matter. There was a poison arrow that he took. So he took the poison for someone else. And I think that kind of tying into what Lou was saying, but for me, how I look at it is this idea that our world has taken on the poison of others. Like we have literally taken on the poison of other people and taken on the suffering, like somebody else suffered, therefore I can't be happy. This person in my life is having a bad time. I'm not allowed to smile or go and do something good for myself.
Mm.
So literally, if you're thinking about somebody taking, in this case, Chiron, never being able to cure that, the great healer could not heal himself because that stuff wasn't his, right? But he carried it. And so the idea that if we are, wounded or hurting over our emotional turmoil that we've taken on because somebody else gave it to us, and now we're being released with this idea of letting go of it, letting it go into the night. What Lou's saying, I love that idea of looking at it for the night, because when we're in the night is when we're looking either at our dreams or our fears, the things that we can't make out exactly what they are. So yes, we can have a light going all the time, and therefore we can pretend like you would do if you had a fire in the forest or in the bush. You light a fire if you're alone so that no animals will come and attack you, right? But at some point, you're going to have to do something else. You can't just sit at the fire, right? You have to actually say, well, I can stay here and die, or die when my fire dies out, or I can move on to something different and take a risk, And maybe that it means moving or doing things sometimes at night. So I do think that's a very powerful thing to recognize that the night is not our enemy.
And get used to the feelings again, and and it reminds me of my husband. He's Mr. Busy. He's always doing stuff around the house, right? And we had a friend once who said, "Oh, just tell Chaz, that's his name, that he's a human being, not a human doing." And it kind of reminds me of this, actually. I think we're remembering that we're human beings and we don't have to be doing all the time. We don't have to be achieving all the time. We don't have to be seeking something more and all that kind of stuff. We can just be, which is very Aries in a way, actually, because Aries is just I am, and we've lost a lot of that as well. So.
Well, I think too, in the presence of self, I'm just thinking about how all these things kind of tie in. The one energy of Chiron, this idea of being in Aries, which is also the first thing, the 19s, the 19 of the year, the 19 of the sun and moon, this new beginning energy that is even the 11 day, the ones, this idea of being new and looking at oneself in wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And the mystery, to me, that's the wonder of, wow, look at the amazing thing. Like, I can look at the stars and go, I am made of stars. How magical is that? I can choose something different. I don't need to be stuck in whatever I'm doing. I can let go of it.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the relationship as a child, like, a lot of our choices are made from that childlike, childish maybe, place where we've made decisions and we haven't looked back. Like, we don't like people, we don't like conflict, and we don't want people to be unhappy, and we don't want people to insult us, and so we're kind of retreating, and that stuff has to stop, because there's a difference. And kindness, we can be kind to somebody without agreeing with them. We can be kind without going along with them. We can say, you know what, you're right, but you go there and I go there. Like, we don't have to be connected, just like the Chiron thing. The idea of keeping someone else's pain so that they wouldn't suffer is that same thing, whatever level it is that's impacting you.
So, sorry, I thought you were finishing.
You wanted to say something about that?
Oh, I was just it just came to mind to tell the listeners who like to learn a bit of astrology through this, that Chiron is actually associated with Sagittarius. I wouldn't give it rulership particularly. I'm wondering if we're actually moving away from rulership as such. But Chiron, and I had I went to the training in Portland for Kairos astrology, which is about kind of this half light, twilight, looking at things with second attention as well. And I actually did a shamanic journey in it, in which I saw, because Sagittarius is the archer, the half man, half horse, with the bow and arrow. Chiron was an archer too. He taught archery. And I had the two of them by my side, kind of side by side in this vision. Chiron with the front legs of a man, though. So whereas Jupiter's a little bit more animalistic, and because he's got forelegs of a horse, and Chiron's only got the back legs of a horse, so he's more human than Jupiter even, which is kind of interesting. So that was just a little aside about, really. Right. And it's all leading to where all this energy is in Sagittarius, of course. So.
Right. And what's interesting, it comes to mind, is compromise, right? There is that point of compromise. Like, when is the compromise something good, and when is it something that keeps the poison or keeps you afraid, so you've always got to have the light on? So there's all of those aspects, right? Because it's one thing when you're a horse, for instance, like Jupiter, you know who you are. There's nothing you need to do to try to fit in with others. And when you're in between, which so many of us are, just based on the way we've been raised in the world, we're constantly looking for somebody else to tell us we've done it right, or that this is the way it's done. And that's all falling by the wayside. So we're being given this freedom, but we have to take the steps, remembering that the 12 is 1 + 2, which equals 3. And I wanted to talk about something that I think is kind of interesting to me, from the numerology point of view is that when we look at Saturn, Saturn is 19 degrees, right? So there's the 19 we've talked about right now, the 1 and the 9. So it is both the dark and the light, right? There's the one that's the endings, the beginnings, however you want to put it. And again, that 19 is about shining our light without ego. It's just being who we are. Then we have Venus, who's the 2, the 20. So 20 is this number, it's called the awakening. It's about coming to that realization that even though we like to connect to others, we're not going to give up who we are. We're not going to give up that connection we have with the divine, with our intuition, in order to activate what we need in the material plane. So there's Venus at the 2. So we have 1, 2, and then Pluto is at 21, which is a 3. 2 plus 1 is 3. So all of those 3 there are just playing out that energy. And then it really is very powerful, right? It's that 1, 2, 3. It's reminding us that 1 is that thing about coming back into our own bodies, connecting to our own intuition. That 2, that thing, connecting first to ourselves before connecting with others. And then finding the joy, the total mystery of being in a place we don't know, the unknown, the dark or whatever it is, that's the unknown. That's the exciting stuff. Because in the light, everything is pretty clear, like it's cut and dried, right? But depending, of course, but when in clear light, it's cut and dried. And so when you have shadow, when you have the things you can't see, when things are over bright or complete darkness, they're all mystery. And that allows us to venture into the unknown, to take risks, because we did talk about our star. What's it called? Bellatrix?
Yes, Bellatrix, the fixed star Bellatrix is at about 20 degrees of Gemini. So conjunct the moon on this full moon. Yeah.
Right.
And
that's so
she's well, just to say what Bellatrix is for people, we looked her up, and she is daring and adventuresome. So there you go.
Right. The warrioress, the female energy, the Amazon warrior energy, which ignites that thing, like we've been talking about, this idea when you know you have the courage, even though you don't know what's happening. When you know you have that sense of adventure, or you can make a quick decision, you feel safer, because we're in this duality where we have to make choices now. We have to move away from the safe choice, because I know that one, and go, okay, I'm on my own. I have to venture into this place, have to do something different to have a different experience, because I'm not going to change my life. Like just getting in fear and trusting that people saying that we're terrible, we don't know what we're doing, and we don't have the right to our opinions, or to have a different climate or something like that, or not to be bullied, not to be abused. Then we're buying into that duality of just one way, that this is how it is, and this is how somebody is holding the bow and arrow, the sword, whatever it is.
And there's so much duality in all of this. As you were talking about these things, it occurred to me, here's Venus, which until fairly recently in traditional astrology was pretty much the only female energy in
the token female,
but apart from the moon, of course, and here she is in this chart, sandwiched right between almost the two bad guys, if you like, of the supposedly male energy, although we now know Pluto has a big heart on it, and and Saturn really is the crone energy, if you like. It's not necessarily, or the death jeweler, not this nasty thing. So there's the duality's coming in so many ways, with Venus softening up that Capricorn, and those two previously seen as very malefic kind of energies. We're moving away from everything's malefic, everything's benefic, you know, everything's good or bad. We're moving to this literally twilight mix of day and night, where everything's got the duality of dark and light and male and female. There is no absolute opposites anymore. So
High potential. Of course, Mercury is about duality, and
yeah,
it's the
and
sign of
Gemini, yeah.
age, sex, or whatever. It can move. It's the trickster energy, not
Mm-hmm.
in a negative way, but just the
No.
idea. There's all this possibility. So we can be fooled, we can be engaged. It doesn't matter. We're living, so we make choices. But you know what I was thinking about when you were talking about that, the three, with the three of them, uh, Saturn, Venus, and Pluto. I was thinking, it feels like that moment where those old stories, like, Venus or the female figure has always been this beautiful figure that taunts people and, treats everyone badly, and they're so shallow. And then these other figures that, are so, right. So it's almost like this phoenix rising with the three of them, because
Yeah.
the number three is so potent. But the three of them rising together going, we're changing this, or we're having this moment where all of that history is just being kind of burnt up, and
Yeah.
new stuff is being like, we don't want to be those figures. We don't want to be those cardboard figures that people made with just this one-sided personality. Oh, I'm just pretty and simple, and I just want to hurt people, or whatever it is. Like, just such bullshit. Like, people are not like that.
No, they're
And
not.
I doubt if the energies of the gods, etc., are like that too, right?
And that reminds me of something I was going to say. Oh, by the way, Jason Holly, who's a fabulous astrologer, who talks about the twilight stuff a lot. I've learned a lot from him. He says that Mercury is bisexual. So, but it reminded me of something I was going to say, and I think we should do the symbols in the question then, or we're going to go on forever today. But talking about Chiron being half human, half horse, but only with the back legs, and the archer, and so much Sagittarius energy in this, and the duality of everything, is that humans we've made ourselves very separate from the world completely. We've said we've got dominion over it, we think we control everything's for our use and everything, whereas really we're just mammals. We're part of it. We go dust to dust, we compost like everything else when we die. Stuff like that. And I think we forget that sometimes, because we get so stuck in our heads of being above it all, and we're not.
Right, or we're trying to think our way out of it instead of feel it with being in the emotion of the moment. Instead, like, we're so caught up in, trapped in old emotion, that our thinking is, our vision is impaired, right?
Exactly.
So we're not making good choices. Somebody was saying, one of my friends had mentioned that she'd heard somewhere, which I thought was really sweet, wonderful idea of, we're not a soul kind of trapped in a body, but the body is being cradled in the soul. And so thinking about that idea of being, yes, we're here as this human creature, but we also have so much more capacity and expansion for just enjoying the experience, like good or bad, just knowing I'm having an adventure, I'm doing this. And again, pulling in that idea, that duality, the intelligence of our minds, the intelligence of our ability, even our adaptability as a human body, is that we do have choices. We can choose, that bisexual thing, or whatever it is, the binary idea is that there are two choices, and there's a way we can choose between that. Like, it's not one or the other always. It can be somewhere else in the middle, just like this thing we're talking about, in a sense. Like, I'm choosing my own story. I'm choosing my own idea of where I sit and what I believe in and who I want to connect with to take this journey further. I do think, though, this is, and I think we have talked about a lot, is the sense that you do have to do something. It's not enough to just think, oh yeah, you're right, that's a different opinion, or I don't need to do it. You actually do need to take action and do things, follow the path, even the hard things, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes, right? The faster it takes you away from the things that make you unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Shall we do the symbols?
Yes, indeed.
I'll let you do the Sabian symbol first.
All right. So 20 degrees Gemini, a modern cafeteria displays an abundance of food, products of various regions. And the keynote is the assimilation of multifarious knowledge through the synthesizing power of the mind. From the one, the many arise in due time. The original source gives birth to the mountain stream, which, gathering to itself the downflow of rainwater, becomes the large river around which cities are built. Those in turn pollute the river on its way to the vast ocean. This modern symbol expresses the fact that woman, now at the close of cultural cycle, is able to gather foodstuffs, mental as well as physical, from many regions of the globe. Her diet has acquired a planet-wide foundation. History tells us that the search for salt and spices, then for commodities rare in local regions, provide the impetus for global trade and thus eventually for a planetary consciousness. The results may be satiety and indigestion and mental confusion caused by a lack of discrimination. And the keynote is assimilation. The negative potentiality of the symbol is waste.
Interesting.
Right, that's powerful.
It is very, yeah. It just speaks to me of this culture we've created of just wanting more of everything, more.
And your dog just sneezed.
Yes, she sneezed.
The divine. But you know what's to me is so interesting, the way I interpret that thing is we cannot go back and punish ourselves for the choices that we've made. We have to realize that everything that has happened has brought us here. And so it's just that continuation. And now we have to, again, gather things and move, to another place, to another consciousness, another idea.
And learn from it, be more discriminating.
Yeah, well, we're just creating a different warehouse of things that are important. Our learning, our understanding, our connecting, the way we treat things, and being more human from a natural point of view.
Absolutely. Okay, so the Chandra symbol is a bull stung by a scorpion. The elaborate ritual of putting yourself through life or death crises to determine what you are made of and how far you are willing to go in this life. Choosing from expanded faculties the optimal situations to enact this battle royale. Selecting what is karmically familiar, variations on old themes involving bondage and freedom. When you are trapped, caught, stuck, a furious inner force asserts itself and can reconfigure everything. But it is a high-stakes ritual drama and loaded with real dangers. You must check yourself out in ultimate ways, for there is surging in your blood an impulse towards liberation, which cannot be distorted in any way. An extraordinary journey through radical tests and trails of an initiatory intensity. It is all about guts and stripping away everything but the true inner direction. And if you must slay and move through illusions on every front, that is just how it is. You cannot survive any longer on old ways to do it. It is time to welcome the enemy into your very midst and discover that there are no enemies. Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I think that describes what we've just been talking about.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay, so we have a question from Jen. if we're ready to move on to that. Yeah.
I am.
Okay. So, hi, Louise and Jen. I did an energetic healing session and received a soul healing. I've been told that I now have a new birth date. The day I got that soul exchange is the new birthday for me, because it could happen, especially in an astrology reading. I'm not sure. In other words, I think she's asking, would you use the new date and time and
Right.
everything for astrology readings going forward after a soul healing like that? And I found that question really interesting because I've never thought about that, even though I've been through many shamanic kind of rebirths and things. I wouldn't replace the whole natal chart with it personally. But I would look at it in relation to the original birth chart, perhaps, if asked. I would look at it as a rebirth in connection with, because I don't think it's really going to change who you were born as personally. That's my point of view. What about you?
Right. I think it's a wonderful thing to an idea of complete freedom of having this rebirth or date, which is really wonderful, especially if you've had a hard childhood or, a lot of abuse or whatever that you're trying to, you want to be reborn. So, and from that point, it's wonderful. As far as looking at a chart, if I was going to an astrologer or I'm an astrologer, I wouldn't look at the chart as my chart. I would look at my original chart, and I would also look at this one going, what's the relationship between the two? And of course, that said, it also depends on you. If you feel like this is your chart, like this is you, then you should do it, because this is ultimately, it's your own choice. You're being given a choice. We're just giving you our points of view. You may have a feeling like, no, this really is my birth thing, and I want to adopt this as my true birth time and date of birth and all of that. And I would kind of look at it and see, does this feel like something that really is you? And then if it does, you can still keep testing it out. You can still keep going back, looking at the two. And at some point you may decide, this is me, or you may go, I'm just going to keep the two there, or I'm just going to stick with my old one.
As an astrologer, though, I would tend, if somebody asked me when they came for a consultation, I would probably ask to see both, because there are certain, life planetary cycles, like the Uranus opposition at 42 and stuff like that. And I think the Uranus opposition is still going to happen at 42 years from your actual birth date. But that doesn't mean that the new rebirth chart would have no significance for you.
Right.
I think as a soul, it would have significance.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I think also, because we don't know, was this soul birth just the other day, right? So you're just a few days old, right? Or was it like the same year you were born and maybe a different date or time, right? So we don't really know all those details.
Yeah. I kind of took it to mean that she was reborn on the day of the healing, but
yeah, maybe
perhaps that's wrong.
I don't know. I was just thinking about that. Like if you've just reborn and you don't have a history of all of that. Yeah, I think from the technical point of view, an astrologer would go, you got to give me the right date and we can look at the other one. On the other hand, this is that mercurial thing where you get to decide if this really feels like who you want to be. Then you're kind of letting go of the knowledge you had, and now you're having none of that knowledge. So I think that's
interesting question.
Yeah, this is an interesting question, an interesting idea.
And something I will think about. And you know what will happen? Somebody's going to come and ask me to do a reading with that now.
Yeah, I think that would be really fascinating to see the difference between the two, because really, what I'm just thinking is, you could just project, if the date was just recently, you could just project out, oh, if this person's like 40 years, okay, what would that chart look like in 40 years, if they're 40 years old, and get some idea and see if that's relevant or not. I don't know, just kind of how my mind's thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because as we change our identities, I do want to say though, our identities change when we do things. And even if we have the same birth time, birthplace, that does not stop us from changing. Right? We're
But
not.
our souls evolve. I mean, well, in modern astrology, we believe that the birth chart is a kind of blueprint of your soul's evolution. It doesn't mean you are set in stone from that birth.
Well, just like numerology, and my belief is that everything is in evolution. Nothing stays still. So just even your belief around something, like the story I shared, it's just like you have a belief and then it may change, or you may turn a corner and you may suddenly see everything differently. The same information, you're just looking at it through a different lens. And I think that's more important sometimes than actually, not to diminish the experience that Jen had.
Absolutely not. And you know, if she came to me with that question as an astrologer wanting a consultation, I'd say bring both. Right. And let's look at both.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so Jen. Oh, Jen. Yes, Jen and Jen. Jen was the question, and I'm speaking to my friend Jen. You can tell Neptune station direct today because it's a day where everybody's a bit in floaty, starry space. But how can people find you?
How can they find me? Yeah, even though I'm feeling fidgety, and every time I look up at this little thing, it looks like I have a flower on my head here on the side. I have a flower on my head. Yay!
It looks cute.
Yeah, kind of like Frida Kahloing it today.
You do look like Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo.
So, where can people find me? At jendushen.com. My cards, the Illuminating Journey cards, are also jendushen.com/illuminating journey cards. And you can find out about my readings and etc. on my website. I'm also on Facebook, and I have a group called We Belong Here. And I have a page, which I think is Jen Dushen on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I do have a membership group that's available on my website. So, Hello Salon. I'm actually in the process of changing all my names, but it doesn't matter. You know, it's just an ongoing thing. But Soul Pillow Salon, so that's a monthly membership. And I am doing a free call. I don't have the exact date yet, but if anyone's interested, it's about letting go of suffering. And that will be in December, probably mid-December. If you're interested, you can find me somewhere and get on the list. It'll be a Zoom call.
Awesome. And I'm Louise Eddington, author of Modern Astrology, Harness the Stars to Find Your Soul's True Purpose, and another book to be published in the new year. You can find me on Facebook. Follow my personal profile on Facebook, Louise Eddington, or I have a business page, Louise Eddington Astrologer. I also have a free group called the Planetary Magic Cafe, where we have a lot of fun actually in that group. It's quite active, and I do some fun challenges every now and again in there. I also loving Instagram lately, so Louise Eddington on Instagram, and I have a membership site too. I turned 60 almost on this full moon, actually 2 days after, and all my fees and membership levels and everything are changing on that day. So if you want to work with me at all, you might want to grab something before December the 14th, because I thought I'd give myself a gift. And so don't forget as well that Jen and I are doing a free call next Thursday, December the 5th. And that's going to be at 12 Pacific, and you'll be able to find details on any of our pages or groups. We're going to be sharing it liberally. It's a Zoom call, and if you're live, you can ask questions, but it will be recorded and we'll be sharing the recording. We're going to do an overview of 2020. We're not going to go into massive detail. We're going to give the big picture as we see it of the main themes of the year. So join us for that and bring your questions. And Don't forget to send your questions, weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com, and leave us a review, please, for this podcast. I'm going to put the review link in the podcast information. And we have a Patreon too, Weirdly Magical Podcast on Patreon. So,
and thank you for all of you who have left us
yeah,
wonderful reviews. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we forget to check sometimes, and we just had a look this week at the reviews, and we were like, wow. Thank you. We're really glad you're enjoying it, so because we do. All right, so from goodbye from Lou for now.
Goodbye from Jen.